It's not only Democratic lawmakers going after Tom Price right now. The media certainly is piling on to this one. Look at what CNN wrote. First on CNN, Trump's cabinet pick invested in a company, then introduced a bill to help it. The report here is pretty scathing, making it appear as though Congressman Price may have personally purchased shares of Zimmer Biomet, a biotech company, medical device manufacturing company. They introduced a bill to help the company. Now, Price is blaming his broker for the trade, and now the Trump team is asking CNN to retract the story. But is this really one they want to stand by? Joining me right now, the host of MediaBuzz, Howard Kurtz, and Kingsview Asset Management CIO, Scott Martin. All right, let's make the distinction here. If you are buying and selling individual stocks, that's obviously different than if you are buying and selling, Scott, your mutual funds. And I point this out because my husband works on Wall Street. And on Wall Street, they are pretty strict about this stuff. So strict that if I so much as want to go out and buy a share in Disney to help explain to my twin 7-year-old girls how the stock market works, and believe me, I'd love to do it, I really can't, because you know what? It's a pain in the you-know-what, because there's so much compliance stuff that you have to go through. They have to okay the sale of it, and then if I ever want to sell that one share of Disney, they have to okay the purchase and the sale of it. So I just wonder why on earth we're holding Wall Street professionals to that kind of standard, and we're not holding people in Congress to that kind of standard, Scott?
You're right, Trish. There's a mountain of disclosure involved with trading these days. In the case of Dr. Price, I understand this was a broker-directed account, which is very important to note because that means that it's a discretionary account where Dr. Price would fill out an agreement with the broker, with the brokerage firm who, as you mentioned, with your husband involved here, takes a big, serious responsibility for the brokerage firm to say, okay, we're going to act on behalf of, say, Dr. Price in this case. So Senator Warren, who seems very over-caffeinated today, was on the wrong track here because as long as these trades were directed by the broker and not directed by Dr. Price via the forms and via the agreements he signed,
really? And if they were, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to the root of this issue, which is it is just wrong. No broker should be buying or selling a stock that a congressman is about to introduce legislation on. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on this one. This is just fundamentally wrong. And when Donald Trump talks about draining the swamp, it's getting rid of this perception of a conflict of interest. Howie, I mean,
well, Trish,
go ahead, Scott, and then Howie's going to join
We've been there before, though, Trish. I mean, some years ago, we had Senator Dick Durbin doing a similar thing. John Kerry, who soon became Secretary of State, had a litany of trades that were in advance of health care reform and things that he made money on.
It's wrong. My point is you should do exactly what my family and I do, which is you should say there's going to be no individual stock trading here. We're just going to invest in a mutual fund. You should be very cautious because you have a responsibility, and part of that responsibility, Howie, is the perception that you're giving all of America. You can't look like you might have your hand in the cookie jar.
It's not that hard to tell a broker, hey, I'm on the health committee, don't buy or sell any health stocks. Look, CNN's original story said that Congressman Price got a donation from this company, was one of many who introduced or co-sponsored this legislation that would help this company by delaying a regulation, and had bought the stock. So the Trump transition team comes back and says, well, that's not fair because the broker bought it, Congressman didn't know. Maybe. But now, at the hearing today, we find about another medical stock, which Congressman Price, Tom Price, in his own testimony says, yes, that was one I personally decided to buy. It wasn't the broker. And I did it after talking to a person who's on the board, who happens to be another member of Congress.
Oh, my goodness. No, this is messed up. That does not look good. And, of course, the Democrats are trying to scuff up this nominee who they don't like because he wants to throw out Obamacare. But these are the kinds of questions that would and should be raised about any nominee. You know, and Obamacare needs to be repealed and replaced. You've heard me go on that bandwagon, so we're in agreement on that. It's just a question of let's make sure we get the right people doing this, and I don't want somebody who's looking like they're on the take, Scott. And, you know, I hear you're saying, all right, the broker did it, but there's a way for someone who's on the Health and Human Services Committee to have gone about this so that, as Howie says, he's not putting himself in this place to begin with.
That's fair, and as Howie mentioned, Trish, maybe the best course of action looking back on this now, being that it's in the past, is for Dr. Price to have said, okay, I reviewed my holdings. Yes, I did not direct the trade, but I realized I held this position that may or may not have benefited for something that I was doing in my government work, and therefore had directed maybe the broker to sell it. But the reality is, I know this from being in the business, when you're acting on behalf of a client and you have discretion as an investment advisor, you make those trades first, talk to the client later, because that is the purpose of the discretionary agreement.
And this is why they need to change the rules. They need to tell all those members of Congress, guess what? Your brokers aren't going to buy any individual stocks, period. You can invest in funds, but there's no individual stock buying because it is too much a perception of a conflict of interest. Howie, 60 Minutes did a big expose on this a while back on basically this is a form of legal insider trading that's happening in Washington, D.C.
Right. This is the swamp that Donald Trump talks about draining. So even if it doesn't technically run up against the letter of the law, when you have congressmen who are voting on all kinds of far-reaching legislation and companies, which of course sometimes donate to their campaigns, which could be affected, you want to, whether you're a nominee or not, you want to be able to say to your constituents and to the world, look, I don't have any even appearance of a conflict because I just have mutual funds and therefore there are no decisions. And Tom Price has many millions of dollars, so he doesn't need to be engaging in each individual trade. Yeah. And so he has some explaining. It's funny, he said this is a courtesy hearing. I didn't see a lot of courtesy at that hearing.
No, well, but, you know, it's like they're out sharpening their knives right now for all of these guys. But my only point is, why make yourself vulnerable to that in the first place? And we need to clean up Washington so that none of them could be accused of something like this. Howie, Scott, thank you so much.